Part two of a brief history of the Roman Empire. So we started with the legend in 753 when Romulus and Remus found the city of Rome. And we want to go at least as far as Julius Caesar and eventually Quo Vadis. At the beginning, the state was a primitive state. It was a tribe, probably was run by a leader, a chieftain, surrounded by a council of elderly, the way other tribes were governed. As the state of Rome, let's call it state at the time, expands, there is a need for a more structured type of institution. And the legend, because at this point we're still talking about legends, names 7 kings in succession. Some of them have been historically determined. Some others seem to be fictional or legendary. In any case, at the beginning there is this structure that is not really a monarchy. It's not a king. It would be like being, the king of Yonkers or something like this. Anyway, he was the head of the tribe. But the Romans were very concrete. They were concrete thinkers, not very smart philosophers, abstract. They didn't think about the netherworld, the origin of humanity, where do we come from, where are we going, God, divinities, and those kind of things. They had a practical approach to life. And the first thing they noticed was the need for institutions in the form of written laws, a code of laws. They came from the need to guarantee property rights, land ownership. At the time, agriculture was the only economic activity, was 99% of the economy. So land ownership was particularly important when Roman added new lands that was taken away from defeated tribes. Whom do we give this land to now that it is ours? To the king? No. To the council of the elderly? Well, okay, partially maybe. The decision was to give it to the best military leaders, the warriors, the distinguished themselves, but also to give it partially to citizens of Rome that wanted to colonize, wanted to have ownership of a piece of land. A little bit like what happened with the Homestead Act after the opening of the frontier in America, where people could settle on Indian land, claim that it was theirs, and the state would acknowledge and recognize it with official deeds. So land ownership was at the foundation of Roman law. The second foundation of Roman law was the need for clear laws of inheritance. Once you have clear established ownership, you need to have also a system of laws that guarantee that, I should say, inheritance. At the time, masters had children with concubines, with slaves. Marital fidelity was not an issue. So it became necessary to invent the institution of legal marriage, also because powerful families wanted their offsprings to marry one another to consolidate their power, things that were already occurring in other parts of the world. Let's call it the normal development of human societies as they get more complicated and more powerful. From this structure where there was a king surrounded by a court, slowly there is a need for more for dissemination and distribution of power and wealth. This happens when countries are getting richer and richer. As they are climbing, they're getting more prosperous, there is more for everyone, for every citizen, not slaves and others. And in order for them to share with this wealth, there ought to be some kind of system. The system that was invented was the Senate. The counselor of the king eventually took power or exercised much stronger power and became the dominant institution. The senators were elected by clans of group of families. There were representatives of simple people and representatives of the upper classes, the merchants, the landowners. Everyone had a degree of representation. Obviously, only Roman citizens. And the Senate, once it became the repository of power, would choose people, two consuls, three consuls, depending on the moment, who for a limited period of time would be the rulers. This situation lasted quite a while, and the Roman Republic felt itself founded on very strong principles of morality, of respect of the law, of civic duty, which are all the themes that show up in Julius Caesar, or at least they're underlining the tension between the factions that are fighting for power. Well, this again, it's human history. Situations are never frozen. They're always in a state of evolution. The Senate lost power and lost the respect of the population, became more corrupt, could be bought by the powers, the most important, the richest people, obviously, and they started serving private interests, rather than the common interest. And this led eventually to to power struggles with individuals who tried to assert themselves and took over control of the state of Rome. This sequence of events was bloody, was messy, and led to very protracted and very violent strife. Julius, so after there are these attempts of personal power, people imposing themselves on the Senate, the situation is very chaotic. And at a certain point, Julius Caesar, who was a well-known military leader by then, coming from a prominent family, allied himself with two of the richest men in Rome, Crassus and Pompeius. Together, they formed a triumvirate, 3 men it means. They imposed their will on the Senate and eventually went ahead to fight it among themselves. That was the civil war that Caesar won first against Crassus and then Pompeius, and led him to the condition and the situation that we witness in Julius Caesar, the play by Shakespeare. So Julius Caesar has a great advantage over other Roman historical figures. He wrote his own history. He was the commander who conquered what is now France. At the time was called Gaul, and he wrote the memoirs of his war, the De Bello Gallico, about the French, the Gaulish, the war in Gaul, Gallic War. And then also wrote the book about the civil war against Crassus and Pompeius, called On the Civil War, De Bello Civili. So I guess that he was a good PR man, because in history, the Roman history, he's probably the best known figure, despite his faults, let's call them that way.